truth is good, but if I come and I don't have a relationship with you and speak truth in your life, it's like, okay, well.
I actually walked with a number of women in the church who had gotten pregnant.
How are we going to help the mom heal?
We want to shift the mindset of communities.
That's huge, right?
So when a woman has her baby, there's help. And it's regular, ongoing help.
You had this burden.
They didn't know what to do.
Right.
And so that's where we built a program where we will help her figure out what to do.
Oh, welcome back to the Lebanon House of Prayer podcast. We're so excited you're joining us today. In-house, we have got Jennifer Hoffman.
Yes.
That's correct.
Yes,
I kept asking my wife, and it's Jennifer Hoffman, and you are with Life Options Network.
Yes.
Oh, man, we are so excited. I'm excited about this interview. Jennifer met my wife. How did you guys meet? Tell us.
We came to a prayer night here.
Okay, yes,
just
I remember
kind of started
that.
talking. Yeah.
Yes. And then our paths kind of crossed?
Yes. And so she asked me to coffee, and then we met at a prayer night we did with her voice movement. So she had come to pray on the stage there, and I was already there to pray. And so we were in line together. Yes. And anyways.
I remember that. I remember that was out at Capitol, right?
Yes.
I remember it was super hot, but it was powerful.
Yeah.
It was powerful.
It really was. Yeah, it was great.
Oh, that was so awesome.
So
well, every person who comes on the Lebanon House of Prayer podcast gets a free gift right here.
Thank you.
But we just started this, so all the people previous didn't get this. So
cool.
No jealousy there. But that is for you.
Awesome.
That's a gift for us. Thank you for coming on.
Absolutely.
So first of all, tell us who you are and where you're from, because that was the first thing that sparked interest, kind of your history. So give us a history.
Absolutely. So I have hailed from the West Coast, and so been out there for most of my life. We moved out here about 2 years ago.
Okay.
And have a ministry out there called Life Options Network, where we help women, moms in need. Been doing that for almost 8 years now.
Wow.
And was really a word from the Lord that said to go and start doing this.
Yeah.
So we've helped thousands of moms across the country because our advocacy program is national. So it's been a lot of fun, and we're looking to do something out here. So we're having a good time prepping for our first benefit out here.
That's so awesome. And so you guys heard the call 2 years ago. Now, how in the world did you choose Middle Tennessee, right?
My
how did you choose Lebanon or Mount Juliet or wherever you're at? You know what I mean? It's like, how did you get here?
Right. Of all the places. Well, and most people were going to Franklin, and my husband was like, no, I just don't feel like that's it. You know, I feel like there's something else. And so he had a job in Nashville he had gotten. And so we ended up moving out here, and it was closer to the airport. That's really what happened. And then all these wonderful people were here, so it worked out really well.
Wow, that's so awesome. And you were in Oregon, and you grew up a little bit. Tell us a little bit about how you grew up.
Yeah, so I grew up, I had political parents. Yes. And my dad was a senator. My mom was a Speaker of the House in Oregon. So some political background for sure.
Yeah.
And that was a lesson in and of itself.
I bet.
And always loved the Lord, was involved in church and building the church. And just really was able to see what it is when you can step out into community and change community.
Yes.
And how important it is that the church is doing that. Right. And so that's really what my heart is.
Yes. And so tell us a little bit about Life Options Network as you've been reaching out. How did you get started?
Yeah.
And probably started with a burden, like you had this burden, and you just started ministering to these moms. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. So I actually walked with a number of women in the church who had gotten pregnant.
Okay.
And they'd gotten pregnant in really tough circumstances, you know, the things that we usually don't want to get pregnant in those circumstances. Okay. And the first one was a gal who had been raped, 14 years old, walked with her for a number of years after she had her baby, watched kind of the social elements behind that. And then I also walked with another woman for about 8 years who had, again, another sticky situation, gotten pregnant. And she actually was homeless 13 times after she had her baby, even though she was a part of a local church.
Wow.
She was working full time. She was not lazy. Yeah. She just really struggled. And I just got to this point of frustration where I sat down with the Lord one day when I was watching the Women's March. You know, I called the abortion march in DC. Right. And all of these women were doing these fake abortions in the street. Wow. And I just cried out to the Lord, and I just said, God, there has to be another answer that is extensive. So when a woman has her baby, there's help. And it's regular, ongoing help.
Right.
for the broken.
Right.
And then ultimately they hopefully get to know who Jesus is in that process. And so that's really what sparked it. And then the Lord, in that moment said, Jenny, I want you to go. And we were not wealthy. We didn't have any connections to do this at the time. There's another story behind why that is. But he just said, I want you to go. And I was like, I don't have the funds. I don't have the connections.
Yes.
And I said, okay, but I'll give you 2 days, Lord.
Wow.
2 days. 2 days. I said, if I hear from someone else that I'm supposed to do this, I will. And I didn't tell my husband. I told nobody.
Yes.
And so the next day, I got a message from a friend of mine on Facebook.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Out of nowhere.
Yeah, out of nowhere. I hadn't talked to her in 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And she said, Jenny, I was watching the Women's March yesterday.
Oh, my goodness.
And we as Christians have to do something.
Yes.
And so that's what sparked it. And it started this 2-year journey of research. And then opened our first free store in 2019 over in Vancouver, Washington. Oh, wow. Now we have 3. We're working on a 4th.
Yes.
And we are working on one, hopefully greater Nashville region to open. And we partner with churches to open these facilities. And ultimately, there are 3 programs with it because we realized the number one need moms have is provision. Okay. So when you look at the thousands and thousands of dollars it costs to have a child, that's on the forefront of women's minds, especially in tough circumstances. Right. And so in those places of need, the abortion clinic seems like a very easy place to go. And it's $500 worth, versus thousands of dollars. Yeah. And then there's the shame factor, right? Because in the church, you get pregnant in a weird situation. Yeah. Obviously, I believe in solid marriage foundation, all of it. Yeah. But, there's situations where you really you need the grace of God. And so we wanted to answer that. And so we have the 3 programs now, which is Provision, which is the free stores. Okay. So these free stores, women get up to $5,000 worth of product and services every single year, every single woman.
Oh, wow.
And then in addition to that, they get advocacy. And that's your relationship, because that was the second thing, was relationship. Okay. How do I stay in relationship, which is where you talk about jobs, where you talk about what good options are out there. Right. And then how do you build a career as a mom? Because a lot of these women have not grown up with parents who cared. Okay. And so they don't really have a reference point for how you have a career as a mom. I also had a real estate company, something I didn't mention, back in Washington. Okay. And I did that for 6 years with my dad, and I did it with little kids, which I just think was the Lord, because it showed me what's possible. Right. When you are a woman and you're in a tough space, you can build something. Yeah. But you just need people around you to help you and to encourage you and to walk with you. And so that's really been key to what we do with the advocacy program. Okay. It's also just a place to offer prayer. Right. A lot of women, they might not know the Lord, but when you say, do you need prayer? Yes. Always a yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, absolutely. Yeah. Wow, so you're meeting all 3 of those needs, and a lot of them single moms.
Single moms. Most times. Sometimes it's young families that are just really struggling. Yeah. But these stores, it's regular connection to the church. Yes. Into the community. Yes. And we've got hospitals and doctors' offices. We've got schools recommending what we do, and we also, the third thing we do is teen parent nights as well. Wow. Okay. And that's actually been the most amazing, I think, too, because you're getting these teenagers in who have children, and they're still teens. They still need somebody to show them how to be a parent. Right. And if you look at even in Tennessee, the foster care statistics, for instance, 9,000, right? Yes. With 4,000 homes. Okay, so we talk about foster care a lot in the church. Right. We talk a lot about adoption, but what if we got to the parents before it got to that place? Yes. And so these teen parent nights are really helping facilitate how to have, good relationship with one another, how to take care of your baby properly. Right. What's a job, what's a good job, how to be a dad. Because one of the questions we asked people these young people, when they came in was, what's your family like? Mm-hmm. And every single one of them said, my family's crazy. Yeah. And so.
Oh, wow. Well, and I love that. I love that second option of advocacy, or just building relationship with them, because that is so important. Just discipleship, how do you do this? Yeah. Right. And it's incredible. Like Brooke and I became parents even at older, we were a little older, and children don't come with the manual.
They don't.
You're like, so I have no idea. Right. I got this little baby and I'm supposed to go home and I'm not even sure how to get the car seat in the car.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's
like,
huge.
So that's just, and I have Brooke and I can't imagine trying to do that as a single mom, being the grocery getter, getting, jobs, all that stuff, daycare, all that stuff. And so I'd imagine this is a huge, huge thing for them.
It's huge. I've had women break down sobbing because they're getting a car seat.
Wow.
I've had women who have told me they are going to have their second baby instead of abort their baby because we've been there regularly for them. There's a gap to be filled.
Yeah.
And, a lot of times we want to meet the need. And I love that we do this too, because we need all of it, right? We need clinics, we need everybody, but we want to not just meet the pregnancy, we want to meet the rest of that life and what that experience is like for that mom.
Yes.
And we're also, you've got a $1.6 billion industry that's very happy to, help women.
Right.
And so if we really understand that amount of money and the advertising capability and all of those things, building local ongoing community care specifically for these demographics, and really social services. I had, it's basically, privatizing some of that, because I actually had a social worker that helped me develop this. And she just said, back in Oregon, especially, they in the 1990s had kicked out a lot of the church and said, we don't want your help.
Right.
And so then she said, but now we're overflowing with kids.
Wow.
And so how does the church reconcile all of this? Well, first off, we serve a big God. Jesus is highly capable. Yes. But I always say he uses us to do his work, right?
That's right. That's right.
So we have to be willing to go out and do some things. And so we work with churches and we make it as easy as possible, because we don't make the pastor do everything. Right. We find that passionate person in the congregation.
Right.
But that's really the key, is finding people in your congregation who want to help run a store and do advocacy and those types of things. And it really comes together well.
Oh, that's so awesome. So you're using the bride kind of to do discipleship. And
Amen.
that's really the key to that.
Yes.
Oh, wow. So going back to the 14-year-old, you said your first story was this 14-year-old who was thinking about aborting the baby, and you worked with her through this. And did she end up having the baby and adopting the baby, or did she?
Right. So she I don't know that she was ever abortion minded.
Okay.
But we were like very close friends. At this time, I was 13.
Okay.
So you're young. You know,
absolutely.
And I saw the response. Unfortunately, at the time, the practice was to pull women up.
Yes.
And she had to kind of share her situation.
Yeah.
And it was really, for me, that was a very formative moment. And then to see how she had her baby. I was there when she had her baby. Yeah. And the isolation these women feel oftentimes, yes. Even in a circumstance where it wasn't your fault that you got pregnant,
right?
There's a huge need that we have and a responsibility we have for these demographics. One of the things that I've been researching, you look at Psalms 10. Yeah. I was reading Job this week, and he talks about the heart of God for the broken, for the fatherless, for the weak. But it's not just because it's a good thing to do.
Right.
Because I think that's kind of the misnomer. Like, we're Christians, we help people. Right. It's because they are headed toward destruction. So you think about in Job, where it talks about, his friends are condemning him. Yeah. And one of the things was like, which Job says, well, I wouldn't do that because they're headed for destruction. Yeah. You look at Psalms 10, it talks about how the enemy, of our souls, he goes after the I guess, low, easy targets, right?
Yeah.
And so the church, we really need to have our arms so tightly around this issue.
Yes.
In a way that's actually answering the why. Because if they're not dependent on the church, they'll depend on the world. And the world's going to send them a death sentence. Wow. And that's really what I've been working to share with more people. So.
And that is so good. And that is such a big deal. That's huge, right? Because and we've read this and we've heard stories about this, and we've personally, Brooke and I have walked people through this, that they get an abortion, and they make that decision and they haven't thought it all the way through, but then they live with the guilt of that, like the blood guilt of that and the shame of that. And a lot of them carry that like forever. And they don't tell you that at the beginning of that, right? And so it's like, if you catch them and be like, listen, this is a big deal. Like, this is a big deal. And so did she adopt the baby or she keep the baby?
So she did keep the baby. Okay, she did. Wow. And he's now, gosh, probably 25.
Wow,
so
good for her.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
wow.
she ended up.
So I love this fact that, like, what you're talking about. So these are sticky situations. You're walking them through that. Obviously, there's pain, trauma, brokenness, any type abuse, obviously, in the midst of this. And I love the fact that you're coming and saying, okay, it's more than just helping the baby.
Yep.
Like, how are we going to help the mom heal, right? Because this could be a path of destruction, right? When you experience trauma like this could be a path of destruction. And so you're calling the bride of Christ to be like, hey, let's rally together and let's bring healing to this mom, to this baby, and let's, now have you had? Do you work closely with like adoption agencies or things like that, or how does that work? One of
the most challenging statistics for me, especially in the beginning, was that most women, and I love adoption, so please know that I'm all for adoption, but statistically, most women will abort or keep.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and one of the things we have to be careful of is pushing adoption too soon.
Okay.
So we really let them bring it up.
Yes.
If they really are wrestling, we might say, have you considered this? So we're careful around it.
Right.
Because if you tell a woman, especially just nowadays, unfortunately, the feminist movement has messed a lot of things up. But there's just kind of this independent of like, I don't need you here. So, unless you're going to be helpful to me, I'm not going to listen. And that's just kind of the world's perspective, especially just of the church, because of some of the condemnation a lot of women have experienced.
Sure.
And so we're just careful around it. Most of the women we work with are keeping. And so it's been a really beautiful thing to see a lot of them like go from being on the street with their kids to having a full-time job and being able to take care of their kids, which is huge. And then they trust us. And I get a lot of letters from women saying, thank you. I remember what you were able to do. So.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
This is amazing. Okay, so now I'm going back to the second story because these jumped into my mind. So you said this the second mom was in a church but was homeless 13 times.
Yeah.
And was the church aware of this, or the church, she just disappeared, came back in? Or I don't think people, right. No, I don't think people knew to the extent. Right.
I will say, I remember making phone calls to people and telling them she was homeless, and they didn't have, people I knew, clue. They didn't know what to do.
Right.
And so that's where we built a program where we will help her figure out what to do.
See, and I love that because I believe that's the church, right? Yeah. Because, we talk about this, Brooke and I talk about this because, and I'm sure you've experienced this moving from the West Coast to what we call the Bible Belt, right? Everybody goes to church, everybody's a Christian, and it's like this Sunday and Wednesday kind of check-in, but it's like, we really don't know what's going on in people's lives just on a Sunday morning or on a Wednesday night. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so like this lady was homeless, And if she just came on Sunday, you would never know.
You would know. Well, and the thing about it is when I say homeless, sometimes they're on the street.
Right.
But sometimes they're staying at a friend's.
Right.
So what happens is then you have these little kids who are going from house to house to house. And this is really what was happening. She's going from house to house to house, really depending on different friends and relationships. But a lot of people didn't want her to stay forever. There was lots of limitations, and she's working full time and trying to find childcare. Now, if you look at the average, $1,200 a month for childcare, if you make over a certain amount, which is what ends up happening. So these women get on the system and they don't get off of it because you make too much, and then your kids don't have anywhere to go. And so we talk about what's the number that will get you out of that and being successful as we do these advocacy programs. And so that's really been the thing for her was she was making too much money. So then there was just a lot of challenges and trials that she endured that were really hard, honestly, to see her go through when I'm like, we have capacity as the church.
Yeah.
We should have thousands of homes for moms. Now, what's interesting is like on the West Coast, it's much easier to be a drug mom than to just be a mom.
Okay.
So for housing.
Yeah.
So like we couldn't over there, it was hard to find housing that was specifically just for mothers in need. But if you're on drugs, sure, we have a whole government program for that.
Oh, wow.
So it really is women. And I always say this enemy hates mothers It's why, and I looked at every angle. You look at adoption; it's crazy expensive.
Yes.
You look at housing for moms. You look at just how difficult it is now that we've have really a need for dual income in most cases in most homes in America to survive because of the feminist movement.
Right.
So now you're in that position where women have to work and raise children in many circumstances. Which, by the way, there's definitely exceptions to that. And yes, there's sacrifices people can make. So I'm not like ignoring any of that, but statistically, that's really what it is. And so, how do we come back to family?
Yeah.
How do we go back to getting our arms around broken people, people who made mistakes, who Jesus fully loves, fully wants to bring them into his body, and see these miracles happen for them and their children.
Yes.
And then we want to shift the mindset of communities to recognize, hey, we're the ones who will take care of you. We're the ones, and we're not going to do it halfway.
Yeah.
We can't be halfway about people dying, about people losing their souls, right?
Yeah,
and so if we are bringing shame into the lives of women when they walk in our doors, or we're not just really seeing them as Jesus does. My favorite reference is in the Bible, the adulterous woman. Everyone stands around her and says, she sinned and she should be stoned. And then Jesus says, you who are without sin, cast the first stone.
Right.
Right. And this is so cool. And he says, but he didn't just leave her there. He said, go and sin no more.
Yes.
Right. Because it's truth and love. It's those two things together.
That's good.
We can bring into our communities. And right now there's just, we've swung so far to just either one way or the other. And I'm right there in the middle where I'm like, we just really need both, right?
Yes,
especially when it comes to pregnancy and parenting. And to recognize, like, every single person that's broken, Jesus said, as you serve the least of these, so you have served me.
Yes.
And how serious we should be taking that as Christians. It's so key.
Oh, I love that. And I love that truth and love. We've been talking about that, Brooke and I have been talking about that, because, truth is good, right? But if I come and I don't have a relationship with you and speak truth in your life, it's like, okay, well, who are you, right? But I can love you, but like, if you don't get out of the road, you're gonna get hit by a semi. You know what I mean? So it's like, I love you enough to tell you truth, and I'm walking in relationship so I can share, share truth with you. And so that's that is so huge. Like, I think that's what brings freedom and healing and wholeness.
Yes.
And so I love that. I love that. Wow. Our 20 minutes is up. This has been amazing.
Thank you.
Tell people how to get a hold of you, like Life Options Network.
Yes.
Share websites. Any information you got on that?
Lifeoptionsnetwork.org. You can go there. Follow us at Life Options Network on Instagram.
Okay.
And if you have questions, just information at lifeoptionsnetwork.org. We're there to answer any questions that people might have. Or if you're a pastor and you want to open a space, we're willing to talk and start that process as well.
Oh, this is awesome. Oh, wow. Well, thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you soon.